Hello. Hi,
Hi,
Nadia. How are you?
Thomas. Good to
Hi.
see you.
Good to see you too.
I would like to start with a quick round of introduction. Would you mind sharing a few words about yourself for our audience?
I'd love to. So first of all, everyone, this isn't where I live. I'm in the office today, so I don't want to give any sort of false impressions. I'm originally from Canada. I'm born and raised, spent half my career there, moved over to the UK in 2014 is where I live today. I actually live on the coast. I don't live in London, so I live right by the sea. I commute in a few times a week. And I have the pleasure of leading our Slack professional services organization for the EMEA region, so for Europe and Middle East and Africa. And that's a little bit about me, Nadia.
Wonderful. And I know that for you, the topic of human-centric leadership is something very precious. That is something that you're very passionate about. So could you maybe tell us what is your understanding of the term human-centric leadership and why is it something that you care so deeply about?
Yeah, I'm just also, as I've been thinking about this, I'm just so happy about how much more popular this whole concept has become over the past few years. And what it means to me, just to keep it real simple, I think a human-centric leader, it starts with self-awareness and just being in tune and balanced as a person. And we all talk a lot about being connected from your heart, your mind, and your soul. People really pick up on that beyond language and communication. I think human beings know when somebody is present and grounded. It's leading from your values. So no matter how hard things get or how good things are, you're being consistent on your core values and the way that you're showing up and the way that you're behaving and leading. And really, the essence of it is connecting with people as people. So regardless of hierarchy or rank or job title or whatever it is finding that connection point, human to human, and really understanding what make people tick. And when you do that right, you can really get your teams to do amazing things together. So that's what it means to me, Nadia.
Wonderful. And I was curious because you were also talking about how the world looked different in terms of this 10, 15 years ago. Was there maybe a particular moment in your career that helped you shape your understanding and the importance of this topic? Like anyone who inspired you to change and adjust your behaviors, perhaps?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I'd probably go right back to my childhood in terms of sort of setting the context for my answer. I think everyone here can relate to this, as when you're a kid, everyone's just showing up and being human beings. There's no cloaks, there's no costumes that are going on. But as I grew up, and especially when I got to later part of my education and into university, what I found happening was like bizarre in my mind. People started to start playing these roles, and I almost sort of likened it to the way that I remember seeing people being business people on TV shows or on movies. And all of a sudden this was happening with my friends and this was happening with my peers, and it was happening with me too. I felt really uncomfortable with it because I was like, I think I need to play this role in order to get a job and in order to start my career. And the moment that it changed, because I was in a really weird place with this, it didn't feel right. I felt uncomfortable. It was like the work Thomas and the real life Thomas. And I had the opportunity to work for a wonderful startup about, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago called Eloqua. Maybe some of you will know it. And this company rapidly went in the marketing automation space from IPO and then got acquired. It was really successful. But the leaders there, and probably the best leader I ever worked for, her name was Karen Pisha. The way she showed up is like, I was just in awe of her because I could just tell that was Karen. That was Karen, who was Karen with her husband and her family on the weekends, how she would be when she went out, what she'd be like walking the dog. That's what she was like at work. But she led with such conviction and command in the way that she was able to pull the organization behind her in such a motivating and inspiring way. And during my boot camp and onboarding at Eloqua, I realized that the whole leadership team was set up this way. And I remember thinking, oh, I'm such a kid in this world because look at all these people are actually doing it. How are they doing it? And it was that group of leaders that really inspired me to show me that this was possible. And it was highly successful way of running a business as well.
Mm-hmm. So what I read in your answer is that she was quite an authentic leader and she brought like herself to work. So I would be curious, like, what is your opinion on how can more leaders become like this? Like, how can we adopt these behaviors or these leadership styles?
Yeah, and that is a good question. I love talking with you, Nadia, because you always ask the good questions. And I can relate this to my day-to-day in terms of the way that I'm working with leaders that are either on my team or leaders that are in other functional areas. And I think the number one thing is to lead by example. And it's a really scary thing to do. I just started working at Slack and for Salesforce about a year and a half ago. And all of me wanted to go back into that role mode that talk about numbers and KPIs and all the business jargon. But I reminded myself that some of the things that I enjoyed the most working with teams and working in my job was just being my authentic self and really being whole and being connected that way. And so I think number one, to show other leaders this is okay, because it's scary, is you need to lead by example. You need to take the first step. You need to take that vulnerability. You need to take a chance. It doesn't feel great, but it's wonderful when you see what that creates in the room, right? When you take that first step. And then it's also, I think, really encouraging the leaders around you and on the team, especially if they're working on your team, for all the leaders out there, encourage them, encourage those things that are unique about them, celebrate them, recognize them, help them feel proud about who they are, and really help bring that and emulate that at the workplace.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of these things that you mentioned and those attributes and this authenticity is what leads to psychological safety. And we could argue that it is precisely psychological safety that is the bedrock or cornerstone or whatever you want to call it of human-centric leadership. And we know from our experience that it is when we feel safe to make mistakes, speak up, take risks, that the company and culture is actually healthy and thrives. But when I was doing a little bit of reading into this, I saw a lot of articles that are talking about a new trend, and they call it a trend of safetyism. And this is where leaders become overly cautious and they kind of wrap their employees and teams into a bubble wrap to a point where actually people don't feel like they want to take risks. So I just wanted to ask you, do you think psychological safety can be built without taking any risks?
So again, really good question. And I think let's discuss this for a few minutes, because where I want to take it is, what does psychological safety mean to me? And what does psychological safety mean to you and to everybody who's listening to this right now? Because there'll probably be a common thread in the answer, but psychological safety is a very personal experience as well, right? What does that mean to the individual? What's the context, etc. Now, we've all been through the last 3 or 4 years, especially, if it's the tech space you're in or another industry, everybody has been impacted by the pandemic and the post-pandemic era. And, I think this is also why this is such a prominent question, why we're talking about it today. But I think when I think about psychological safety, I think context is probably the fundamental concept to sort of delineate the conversation. Psychological safety in my personal life, your personal life, and everyone's personal lives are based on a set of values. So for me, it's family, it's security, it's fun, it's these type of things. At the workplace, it's not the same thing in my mind. And psychological safety at the workplace and the way that I foster this within my organization and all the teams that I've been able to lead is through honesty. And I think it's a mistake to tell everybody everything's going to be okay, because we don't know that as leaders. You don't know that as a leader. There are events that are outside of our control, and that's part of the role. So, when I think about building that psychological safety with people at the workplace, honesty builds trust. And I love some of the previous speakers on this in terms of the tips and the tricks that were being offered to build that trust. But I try to treat every single person on my team or in the organization, regardless of where they are in the organization, as the adult and as the person they are. And I trust them with the truth, because that's what I think helps them feel safe in the context that we're in is that they can trust that I am providing them with the transparency, and also I am trusting them with the good news and the not so good news, so that they can sort of build their own conception of what's happening in the context of the vision that I'm also setting with the team. So, Nadia, I think when I think about the concept of too much, I think about a story of a very dear friend of mine who became a dear friend in a previous job, and he was managing a team. And he actually built too much safety with his team. He was almost like a father-like figure to the team, and the team were his children. And that has nothing to do with age or anything like that. It just has to do with the analogy of what it felt. And they lived in a bubble, and it felt good to be in a bubble. They were loving it. But what really hit hard was when something that this manager couldn't control hit the team, it burst. And it was a very, very harsh sort of reality and a response to the situation. So that's where I think, psychological safety, that's a bad example of how it could be in the workplace.
Yeah, that's a wonderful example. And on this note, we actually have a little poll prepared for the audience, which is, can psychological safety go too far? So I can see that people were already voting in the background. And it seems like half of the audience is actually not sure. So what is your take on this, Thomas?
I'm not surprised, right? Because I think, for everybody here, the last 3 or 4 years have been heavy, right? It's been heavy. And I think people, at least from what I'm seeing and what I'm feeling, are reestablishing the way that they feel about work and what that relationship feels like. I know, one concept that sort of talk about a little bit is, don't hear it so much in Europe, but in North America and working in Canada and working out through the US, is the concept of we're a family, right? At the workplace, we're one big happy family. I totally understand that from, let's set a culture with the same values that identify in a family. But let's be honest, it's not a family, right? Like we are coworkers, we are friends, we are colleagues at the workplace. We create some wonderful lifelong relationships at the workplace. But at the end of the day, the concept and the definition of a business and a corporation is that it's not a person. It's an entity with financial responsibilities to stakeholders. And so that entity would never be part of my family. Do you know what I'm saying? Like that at my house, that's not what my family feels like. And so I think where there was a huge sort of really great surge in business in the tech industry, and I'm only speaking about tech right now, post-pandemic, it's been harsh. It's been really harsh. And so a lot of the messages around culture and the way that things are supposed to feel like at work aren't feeling that way. And I think this is why I'm not surprised to see that answer, is because I think people are trying, and as am I, are redefining what that means in my mind. And so the question I think everyone needs to ask themselves is, what do you need from a psychological safety point of view at the workplace? What's realistic and what might not be, so that the right expectations are set for yourself, because at the end of the day, that's going to help protect you, and that's going to help you feel better and more empowered at work.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. And I have to admit, I do have a list of questions that I had prepared for you, but I can see that the audience has much better questions than I could obviously ever think of. So if that's okay, I would just love to pull the Slido Q&A up there and give floor to our audience.
These are the moments your heart starts pounding. So be kind, but let's go.
Let's go. But the first one and the most upvoted one is actually around organizational restructuring. And this is something you've been part of and we've been part of. So the question is, it often disrupts team dynamics, and it can also erode trust. So what strategies or actions can leaders take to rebuild trust and strengthen teams during such difficult or challenging times?
Yeah. Thank you to whoever has asked that question and voted for that question. So yes, I've been through it. I've been through it quite a bit over the last decade. I have been on both sides of it. So I have been the recipient of not knowing the organizational change and receiving it. And I've also been part of the steering leadership team that has planned it. So just to make sure that I hit the crux of the question, it's about, it affects team dynamics that can erode trust. So I think the answer is it does, right? It sucks when it happens. Like when you're on a team that's you really like and you're performing really well and something changes, you're like, why is this happening to me? And, I think where I've seen this done really well and the lessons that I've learned as a leader in terms of helping teams through the change management aspect of this, again, comes down to proactiveness in information exchange and honesty and trusting people like the adults that they are on the team with the information. It's very hard as a leader to learn. And I'm not saying I'm perfect at this yet either. It's something that I am really, really focused on, is delivering negative news isn't easy. I don't like making people feel sad. I don't like that negative energy. And I used to be scared of it. Like I used to hide of it. And that got me into trouble as a leader because I wasn't being honest with the people that I was working with. And so from a development perspective, if any of you are like me, what I learned a few years ago was there's so much magical power in delivering that negative information and letting people be upset and being there to support them, listen, and don't always try to solve, because sometimes you don't know all the solutions. Sometimes things just stink, and that's just it. And listening and being that active listener, supportive, and also knowing the types of resources that you can bring to the team to help them through that time, whether, it's things like, hey, just check out for get your work-life balance in gear, really focus on some exercise or hobbies outside of work to remember the bigger perspective in life. That's really helped, myself and the teams that that I've worked through with this. But the key thing is trusting the people you work with, give them the information, give it to them like they should hear it. Don't sugarcoat it. Help them understand the greater context, the reason why this is happening, and equally help predict the future, help them know where this is falling and why this is happening, so you can help people develop the greater context of what's going on. So I hope I did an okay job answering that, but that's it.
Thank you so much. It seems like honesty is the keyword of our chat. And I think we have time for one more question. And it's another anonymous with 15 upvotes asking about employee well-being. And we can also, talk about the culture and many different things. But the question still stays the same. Where is the line between what is the leader's job and responsibility, and when does the employee responsibility come in? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, look, I'll be straight up on this. I think every person's responsible for themselves and in terms of their well-being. I think as a leader, what the role is as a leader is to be a role model, but also a facilitator of all the resources that are available in the organization to make sure that employees or the team know how to access those. That said, my initial answer in terms of it being everybody's personal accountability, true. But as a leader, I care deeply about the people that I work with. And I often am checking in with them, not just about work, but how they're doing as a person. And I build that personal connection with them, because if someone's not happy and something's wrong, they're not going to be working well. And so my number one sort of focus on every single person I work with that's on my team is making sure that they're okay. And if they're not, figuring out what the issue is and helping bring the resources to them to help them through their issues.
Wonderful. Thank you, Thomas. I'm trying to see if we have time for one more question. What do you think, from Sammy?
I'm ready to go. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's do one more. So Sammy, thank you so much for submitting your name. We're asking all of our staff or their staff work remotely, and this person gets frustrated that tasks, assignments, and day-to-day work isn't completed and on time. I have tried to motivate and inspire my team and take their lives into account, but nothing is moving to the needle. So any advice for Sammy?
Well, Sammy, that's a That's a hard question to answer in the 30 seconds that we've got. But Sammy, if you want to connect on LinkedIn, I'd be happy to talk with you afterwards. I'm hard pressed to answer that question without greater context and knowing the industry or the business that you're in. And so, yeah, I think I'm going to say no answer on this one because it sounds like this one needs more of a discussion, and I want to be respectful to that.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you so much, Thomas, for your time and for your wisdom. Always happy to have you with us. So, yeah, hopefully we'll get.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here with the rest of the speakers that you have. Thank you for having me. I think you're all doing wonderful things. So thank you, Nadia.